The laughter came from everywhere at once. Dr. Lena Okonkwo stood in the center of the Galactic Assembly Chamber while 300 alien delegates made sounds of amusement at humanity's expense. Some clicked their mandibles, others whistled through spiracles. The Velorath, tall avian creatures with feathers that shimmered like oil on water, simply tilted their heads and let out sharp cawing noises that echoed off the domed ceiling. Lena kept her hands folded in front of her. She was a linguistic anthropologist, not a diplomat. But Ambassador Rail had insisted she attend the formal introduction ceremony. "You need to see how they treat us," he had said. "It will help you understand why your work matters." Now she understood. High Speaker Tyran of the Velorath spread his wings as he addressed the assembly. His voice carried the weight of a species that had traveled between stars when humans were still learning to control fire. "We welcome humanity to the Galactic Concord," Tyran announced. "Though perhaps welcome is too strong a word, let us say we acknowledge their presence, as one acknowledges a child who wanders into a room full of adults." More laughter. Lena watched Ambassador Rail's jaw tighten, but he said nothing. They had agreed before arriving that they would endure whatever insults came their way. Humanity needed allies, and making enemies of the founding species would doom their application for full membership. "Your species has achieved faster-than-light travel," Tyran continued. "Congratulations, the Velorath accomplished this 17 million years ago. The Korvathi did so 12 million years ago. Even the Morthek, whom we consider young, mastered the void 3 million years before your ancestors climbed down from trees." Tyran paused, letting his words sink in. "You are infants. Your history is measured in thousands of years, ours in millions. What could you possibly offer the conquered? We have seen species like yours come and go, bright flames that burn out quickly. You will be forgotten, as all young things are forgotten." The ceremony continued for another hour, filled with similar speeches from other delegates. By the end, Lena felt hollowed out. She had known humanity was considered primitive by galactic standards, but hearing it spoken so openly, with such casual contempt, made it real in a way that reports and briefings never had. Afterward, she wandered the station alone. Ambassador Rail had meetings to attend, damage control conversations with species that might still be willing to trade with humanity despite the Velorath's obvious displeasure. Lena had no such duties. She was here as an observer, a specialist who might prove useful if linguistic barriers arose. So far, the only barrier she had encountered was arrogance. She found herself in the archive wing, a vast section of Station Meridian dedicated to preserving the cultural heritage of extinct civilizations. The conquered had existed for so long that entire species had risen and fallen within its borders. Their languages, their art, their stories, all of it was stored here, waiting for scholars who would never come. Lena walked through halls lined with artifacts. Her translator implant provided basic information about each display, but most were labeled simply as unknown origin or untranslatable. She stopped in front of a wall of inscriptions. The glyphs were angular and precise, carved into a material that looked like black glass, according to her implant. These were relics of the predecessors, the mythical ancestors of the Velorath who had vanished millions of years before recorded history. "Untranslatable," her implant informed her. "No living species retains knowledge of this language." Lena leaned closer. Something about the structure caught her attention, the way certain symbols clustered together, the patterns of repetition. She had spent 20 years studying dead languages on Earth, from Sumerian to Linear A to Proto-Indo-European. Human languages followed certain rules, certain deep structures that seemed almost hardwired into the brain. These glyphs followed similar rules. She pulled out her tablet and began taking photographs. Her heart was beating faster now. This was probably nothing, a coincidence of pattern recognition, her brain seeing connections that did not exist. But what if it was not nothing? She worked for hours, cross-referencing the predecessor glyphs with her database of Earth languages. The similarities were not exact, but they were there. The same underlying logic, the same grammatical bones beneath different flesh. By the time she finished her preliminary analysis, the station's artificial lights had dimmed to simulate evening. Lena sat on the floor of the archive wing, her tablet glowing in her lap, and tried to process what she had found. The predecessors had spoken a language that shared structural DNA with humanity's oldest tongues, not borrowed, not copied, but evolved along parallel lines, as if intelligence itself followed certain paths when developing communication. And if she was right, if she could actually decode this language, then humanity held the key to something the Velorath had lost millions of years ago. Their own history. Lena found Ambassador Rail in his quarters, still wearing the formal robes he had worn to the ceremony. He looked exhausted, beaten down by a day of subtle and not-so-subtle humiliations. "I need to tell you something," Lena said. She explained what she had found, the parallel structures, the possibility of translation, the implications for humanity's position in the conquered. Rail listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that you can read the language of the Velorath's gods." "Not gods," Lena corrected. "Ancestors, the predecessors were a real species. They left behind real artifacts, and I think I can understand what they wrote." Rail stood and walked to the window. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. "The Velorath have spent millions of years telling themselves they are the inheritors of a great legacy," he said. "They have built their entire identity on being the children of the predecessors. And you are telling me that a species they consider barely sentient can read the words their own ancestors left behind?" "Yes." Rail turned to face her. Something new burned in his eyes, not hope exactly, but something close to it. "Then we have a choice to make," he said. "We can use this as a weapon to humiliate them, or we can use it as a gift to earn their respect." Lena thought about the laughter in the assembly chamber, the contempt in Tyrann's voice, the way 300 species had looked at humanity like they were nothing. "Why not both?" she said. Rail smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Now you are thinking like a diplomat." 3 weeks of sleepless nights had turned Lena Okonkwo into something resembling a ghost. She sat in her cramped research quarters surrounded by holographic displays, each one showing a different fragment of predecessor text. Her eyes burned. Her coffee had gone cold 6 hours ago, but she could not stop, not when she was so close. "The verb always comes third," she muttered to herself. "Subject, modifier, verb, object, just like Proto-Indo-European, just like Sanskrit." Specialist Yara, the young linguist Anthropic had sent to assist her, looked up from her own workstation. "Did you say something?" "I think I have the grammar," Lena said. "The basic structure, at least. These people thought like we do. Their brains organized language the same way ours do." Yara walked over and studied the displays. She was fresh out of the academy, eager and brilliant and still young enough to believe that hard work always led to success. Lena had been that young once, before she learned that the universe rarely rewarded effort alone. "So we can translate it?" Yara asked. "Not yet. We have the skeleton. Now we need the flesh. I need more samples, primary sources, not these copies in the archive." A soft chime announced a visitor. Lena almost ignored it, but Yara was already moving to the door when it opened. Lena was surprised to see a Velorath standing in the corridor. The alien was old. His feathers had faded to gray, and his movements were slow and careful. He wore the simple robes of an archive keeper, not the elaborate ceremonial dress of the diplomats. "Dr. Okonkwo," the Velorath said. "I am Keeper Soril. I manage the cultural archives on this station. May I enter?" Lena hesitated. No Velorath had spoken to her voluntarily since she arrived. She had assumed they were all united in their contempt for humanity. "Please," she said, "come in." Soril moved into the room, his eyes scanning the holographic displays. When he saw the predecessor glyphs, he stopped. His feathers rose slightly, a sign of strong emotion in Velorath body language. "You are studying the predecessor texts," he said. It was not a question. "Yes, and you believe you can read them." Lena chose her words carefully. "I believe there are structural similarities between predecessor writing and certain ancient human languages. I am exploring whether those similarities might help with translation." Sorrel was silent for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked Lena more than anything that had happened since she arrived on the station. He sat down. "My grandmother used to tell stories," he said. "Old stories passed down through generations. She said that before the Velorath became great, we were nothing, animals, savages. It was the predecessors who lifted us up. They taught us language and science and art. They made us what we are." He paused, his eyes still fixed on the glyphs. "But we lost their tongue. Millions of years ago, we lost the ability to read their words. My grandmother said it was the greatest tragedy of our history. She died believing we would never recover what was lost." Lena felt something shift in the room. This was not a diplomat playing political games. This was an old man carrying the weight of ancient grief. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Sorrel turned to look at her. "Because if you can truly read the predecessor language, then you can give us back something precious, something we have mourned for longer than your species has existed." High Speaker Tyrion does not seem interested in anything humans have to offer. "Tyrion is afraid," Sorrel said. "He has built his power on the myth of Velorath's superiority. If a young species can do what we cannot, that myth crumbles, but not all Velorath think like Tyrion. Some of us remember what we lost, some of us want it back." He stood, moving toward the door. "There is a place called the Sacred Vault," he said. "It contains artifacts too holy for public display. Among them is the Foundation Stone, the oldest predecessor relic in existence. No living Velorath can read the inscriptions on it. We have tried for millions of years." "You want me to translate it?" "I want you to try," Sorrel said. "But I must warn you, entering the vault without permission is a crime. If we are caught, I will be imprisoned as a traitor. You will be protected by diplomatic immunity, but your work here will end." Lena looked at Yara, who had been listening with wide eyes. Then she looked at the holographic displays, the fragments of a dead language that had occupied her mind for 3 weeks. "When do we go?" she asked. Sorrel's feathers rippled. She had learned enough to recognize it as surprise. "You agree just like that?" "Keeper Sorrel, I have spent my entire career studying languages that nobody speaks anymore. I have translated texts that most people consider useless, curious, relics of a forgotten past. For the first time, my work might actually matter to someone, might actually change something." She stood and began shutting down the displays. "I did not become a linguist to play it safe. I became a linguist because words are bridges. They connect us to people we will never meet, to times we will never see. If there is a chance I can build a bridge between your people and your ancestors, I am willing to take the risk." Sorrel studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he performed a gesture she did not recognize, wings spreading slightly, head tilting forward. "That is how we show respect," he said. "I do not know if you will succeed, Dr. Okonkwo, but I believe you are worth the risk." He moved to the door. "The maintenance cycle begins at the 3rd hour. Meet me in the lower archive corridor. Tell no one, not even your ambassador." Then he was gone, leaving Lena and Yara alone with the weight of what they had agreed to do. "This is insane," Yara said. "Probably," Lena agreed. "We could be starting an interstellar incident." "Also probably." Yara was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. The same smile Lena remembered wearing when she was young and the universe still felt full of possibility. "So what do we do until the 3rd hour?" Lena sat back down and reactivated the displays. "We study," she said. "We have a lot of reading to do." The sacred vault smelled like time itself. Lena could not explain it any other way. The air was thick with something ancient, a weight that pressed against her skin and made her movements feel slow and deliberate. Keeper Sorrel moved ahead of her, his gray feathers almost invisible in the dim emergency lighting. "Here," he whispered, "the foundation stone." It stood in the center of the chamber, a pillar of black glass that rose from floor to ceiling. Every surface was covered in predecessor glyphs, thousands of them, spiraling upward in patterns that made Lena's head spin. She approached slowly, her tablet already recording. The inscriptions were more complex than anything she had seen in the public archives. Sentences layered over sentences, meanings folded into meanings. "How long do we have?" she asked. 2 hours before the next patrol. 2 hours to photograph and analyze the most important artifact in Velorath history. It was not enough time, but it would have to do. Lena worked in silence, moving around the stone, capturing every angle. Her mind was already processing, already translating. She recognized fragments from her earlier work, verb structures, noun markers, the same grammatical bones she had identified in the archive texts. But there was something else here, something she had not expected. "Sorrel," she said, "this is not just a memorial." "What do you mean?" "The public archives say the predecessors left warnings about the future, prophecies. That is what the Velorath believe, correct? Yes, the foundation stone is said to contain the wisdom of our ancestors, guidance for the generations that would come after them." Lena shook her head. "It is not guidance, it is a confession." She pointed to a section of text near the base of the stone. "This passage describes a war, a conflict between the predecessors and their children, your ancestors, Sorrel, the ancient Velorath." Sorrel's feathers went flat against his body. "That cannot be right. The predecessors ascended. They left this plane of existence to join the cosmic consciousness. Every Velorath child learns this." "That is not what this says." Lena's voice was gentle but firm. "According to these inscriptions, the predecessors did not ascend. They were destroyed by the Velorath." The silence that followed was absolute. Lena watched Sorrel struggle with what she had just told him. His entire worldview was cracking, and she could see the pain of it in the way his wings trembled. "Read it to me," he said finally, "the exact words." Lena took a breath and began translating aloud. "The children grew jealous of their teachers. They wanted the power of the predecessors, but not the wisdom. They wanted the knowledge, but not the responsibility, and so they rose against us. They burned our cities. They scattered our people. They erased our language so that none would remember what they had done." She paused, scrolling to another section. "But we do not blame them. The hunger of the young is natural. We only ask that future generations learn the truth. We only ask that they remember what their hunger cost them. We forgive you, children of our children. We have always forgiven you." Sorrel made a sound Lena had never heard from a Velorath before, a low keening that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. He was weeping, she realized. This was how his species cried. "Millions of years," he said. "We have lied to ourselves for millions of years." Before Lena could respond, lights flooded the chamber. She spun around to see Velorath guards pouring through the entrance, their weapons raised. Behind them, dressed in ceremonial robes, stood High Speaker Tyran. "I knew you would come here eventually," Tyran said. His voice was cold, controlled. "The archive monitors have been watching you since you arrived. Dr. Okonkwo, humanity's little spy, poking her nose into sacred places." He turned his gaze to Sorrel, and his expression shifted to something like disgust. "And you, Keeper, you have betrayed your own people. For what? For the approval of these primitive creatures." "I have not betrayed anyone," Sorrel said. His voice was steady now, the grief replaced by something harder. "I have uncovered the truth, a truth our leaders have hidden for too long." Tyran's feathers bristled. "Arrest the Keeper. As for the human, she has diplomatic immunity. We cannot hold her. But her research is confiscated, and she will be removed from this station immediately." Guards moved toward them. Lena felt her tablet being pulled from her hands. But she had already transmitted her recordings to Specialist Yara. Everything she had found was safely stored on human servers. "Hi, Speaker," she said. "You can silence me, you can destroy my research, but you cannot change what is written on that stone. The truth does not care about your politics." Tyrion stepped closer, close enough that she could see the fury burning in his eyes. "The truth," he hissed, "is whatever the conquered believes, and the conquered will never believe that a species of hairless apes can read the sacred language of the predecessors. You will be dismissed as a fraud. Your people will remain what they have always been, insignificant." Lena smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then let me prove it. Let me address the assembly if I am a fraud. I will be exposed and humanity will be humiliated. You lose nothing, but if I am telling the truth." She let the sentence hang. Tyrion studied her for a long moment. She could see him calculating, weighing the risks. He was confident, she realized. He truly believed she could not do what she claimed. He thought this would be the final humiliation. "Very well," he said. "The assembly will convene tomorrow. You will have your chance to speak, and when you fail, humanity will learn its place once and for all." He turned and swept out of the chamber, his guards dragging Sorrel away. Lena watched them go. Then she looked back at the foundation stone, at the words of a dead people waiting to be heard again. "I will not fail," she whispered. "I promise." The assembly chamber was silent when Lena Okonkwo walked to the central podium. 300 delegates watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt. The Velorath delegation sat in their traditional place of honor, High Speaker Tyrion at their center, his feathers gleaming. Under the artificial lights, behind him, in a detention pod reserved for criminals awaiting judgment, Keeper Sorrel sat with his wings bound. Ambassador Rail caught Lena's eye as she passed the human section. He gave her a small nod. It was all the encouragement she would get. "Distinguished delegates of the Galactic Conquered," she began, "I stand before you accused of trespassing in sacred spaces, of fabricating research, of insulting one of your founding species. High Speaker Tyrion believes I am a fraud. He has invited me here today expecting me to fail." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the chamber. "I intend to disappoint him." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Tyrion's feathers twitched, but he remained silent. "For 3 weeks, I have studied the language of the predecessors, the ancestors of the Velorath. I have found that their tongue shares deep structural similarities with ancient human languages, not because we are related, but because intelligence itself follows certain patterns when developing communication. The predecessors thought like humans think. They organized their words the same way we organize ours." She touched a control on the podium, and holographic images of the foundation stone appeared throughout the chamber. "This is the most sacred artifact in Velorath culture. For millions of years, no living being has been able to read it. The Velorath have told themselves stories about what it contains. They have built their entire civilization on the belief that the predecessors were gods who ascended to a higher plane." She took a breath. "They were wrong." The murmurs grew louder. Several Velorath delegates rose from their seats, their feathers bristling with outrage. But Tyrion raised a wing, commanding silence. "Let her speak," he said. "Let her hang herself with her own lies." Lena nodded, acknowledging the challenge. Then she did something no one expected. She began to speak in the predecessor language. The words were harsh and angular, difficult for human vocal cords. But she had practiced for hours, working with Yara until her pronunciation was as close to the reconstructed phonetics as she could manage. The sounds filled the chamber, ancient syllables that had not been spoken aloud in millions of years. The effect on the Velorath was immediate. Several gasped. One elderly delegate collapsed back into his seat, his wings trembling. Even Tyrion went still, his eyes wide. With something that might have been fear. "Do you know what I just said?" Lena asked. "It is the opening verse of the foundation stone, a hymn of creation. It describes the first sunrise on the Velorath homeworld, the moment when light touched the mountains and the predecessors knew they had found their home. She switched back to the predecessor tongue, reciting another passage, then another. Each time, the Velorath reacted as if struck by physical blows. "Your bodies remember," Lena said. "Even if your minds have forgotten, these sounds are encoded in your DNA, in the deepest parts of your heritage. The predecessors did not just teach your ancestors language. They shaped you, made you what you are." An elderly Velorath in the back of the chamber rose slowly. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Karathvul." The single word cut through the noise. Every Velorath in the chamber turned to look at the old delegate. "What did you say?" Tyran demanded. "Karathvul," the elder repeated. "It means grandmother. My own grandmother used to say it when I was young. She said it was a word from the old times, a word we were not supposed to remember." He looked at Lena, and she saw tears forming in his ancient eyes. "You speak the truth, human. I can feel it in my bones." The chamber erupted. Velorath delegates shouted at each other. Some demanded Lena be silenced. Others called for the full translation of the Foundation Stone. Non-Velorath species watched with fascination, sensing that something historic was unfolding. High Speaker Tyran slammed his wing against the podium, demanding order. "This proves nothing," he insisted. "She could have learned a few words, memorized some sounds. That does not mean her translations are accurate." Lena nodded. "You are right, High Speaker. Words alone prove nothing, so let me tell you what the Foundation Stone actually says, and then you can decide for yourself." She pulled up her full translation, displayed it for the entire assembly to see. "The predecessors did not ascend. They were destroyed by your ancestors. The ancient Velorath grew jealous of their teachers and rose against them. They burned the predecessor cities. They killed the predecessor people. They erased the predecessor language so that no one would remember the truth." Silence, absolute, crushing silence. "But the predecessors did not die with hatred in their hearts," Lena continued. "They left this stone as a gift, not a curse. Their final message was not one of condemnation. It was one of forgiveness," they wrote. "We do not blame the children for their hunger. We only ask that they remember what their hunger cost them." She looked directly at Tyran. "Your ancestors committed a terrible crime, High Speaker, but the predecessors forgave them. The question is whether you are brave enough to accept that forgiveness, or whether you will keep hiding from the truth." Tyran stared at her. His feathers had gone flat, his posture rigid for a long moment. Lena thought he might order her arrested anyway, truth be damned. Then, from the detention pod, Keeper Sorrel spoke. "She has given us back our history," he said. "She has done what no Velorath could do for millions of years. Whatever else happens today, that is what matters." The assembly voted 3 hours later. By a narrow margin, they accepted Lena's translations as legitimate historical record. Keeper Sorrel was released from custody. High Speaker Tyran said nothing as he left the chamber, but his eyes never left Lena's face. She had made an enemy today, she knew that. But she had also spoken for the dead, and some things were worth the price. 6 months had changed everything. Lena Okonkwo stood in the ruins of a predecessor temple on the Velorath homeworld, surrounded by crumbling pillars and walls covered in ancient inscriptions. The air was warm and heavy, with the scent of alien flowers that had grown wild among the stones. Keeper Sorrel walked beside her, his gray feathers catching the golden light of the setting sun. "This was their greatest academy," Sorrel said, "where they trained the first Velorath scholars. My grandmother used to say that the stones here still remembered the old songs." "She was not wrong," Lena replied. "These walls are covered in poetry, lessons, love letters. The predecessors left pieces of themselves everywhere." They walked in comfortable silence. The hostility that had once defined every interaction between humans and Velorath had softened into something more complicated. Not friendship exactly, but respect. A grudging acknowledgement that the young species from Earth had done something remarkable. The Conquered had established the predecessor language initiative. a joint project between human linguists and Velorath historians. Hundreds of texts had already been translated, revealing a civilization far more complex than anyone had imagined. The predecessors had been poets and scientists, philosophers and engineers. They had lifted the primitive Velorath from savagery and given them the tools to reach the stars. And then the Velorath had destroyed them. That truth had fractured Velorath society. Some, like Tyran, refused to accept it. They called the translations fabrications, political weapons designed to weaken their people. Others, like the young speaker Avel who had emerged as a voice for reform, argued that confronting the past was the only path to a better future. "I want to show you something," Sorrel said. He led her deeper into the ruins, to a chamber that had been sealed for millions of years. The entrance was marked with warning glyphs, but Sorrel had obtained permission from the New Velorath Cultural Council to bring her here. Inside, they found shelves carved into the walls, each one holding small crystal tablets, predecessor journals, personal records of the scholars who had once taught in this place. Lena picked one up carefully. The inscriptions were faded but readable. She scanned through the text, her translator implant working overtime to process the ancient language. "This belonged to someone named Velthar," she said. "A teacher, she writes about her students, their struggles, their triumphs, she says." Lena paused, her throat tightening. "She says she loves them like her own children. She hopes they will surpass her someday." She set the tablet down. They did surpass her, but not the way she hoped. Sorrel was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his robes and pulled out a small crystal, different from the others. "I found this in a hidden compartment," he said. "It appears to be the last record of the temple's head scholar, written during the war." Lena took the crystal. The inscriptions were hurried, desperate, the writing of someone who knew they were about to die. "It contains technical specifications," she said. "Mathematical formulas, Sorrel, this is an equation for faster-than-light travel, more advanced than anything the Conquered uses today." Sorrel nodded slowly. The predecessors were preparing to leave. They knew the war was lost. They were trying to build ships that could carry them to safety, but they ran out of time. "They wanted us to find this," Lena realized. "They hid it here, in a place where only someone who could read their language would discover it. They knew that. Someday, someone would come." She looked at Sorrel. "They left this for you, for the Velorath, a gift from the people your ancestors destroyed." The implications were staggering. With this technology, the Conquered could expand beyond the limits that had constrained them for millions of years. New territories, new resources, new possibilities. "What do we do with it?" Sorrel asked. "We share it," Lena said. "Freely, without conditions. We call it the Predecessor Drive, in honor of those who created it. And we let the galaxy know that even after millions of years, the predecessors are still giving gifts to their children." The news spread quickly. Delegations from every species requested access to the new technology. Humanity, the primitive newcomers who had been laughed at in the assembly, became the brokers of the greatest scientific discovery in galactic history. 1 month later, Lena was summoned to meet High Speaker Tyran. She found him in a garden on Station Meridian, sitting alone among flowers that had been cultivated from predecessor seeds. He looked older than she remembered, smaller somehow. The arrogance that had once seemed to radiate from him was gone. "I have read the translations," he said without preamble. "All of them, every record your team has produced." Lena sat down across from him, and I have been a fool." His voice was quiet, tired. "I built my power on a lie. I told my people they were the inheritors of divine wisdom, the chosen children of perfect beings, but we were not chosen. We were forgiven, and that is harder." He reached into his robes and produced a feather. It was longer than the others, marked with intricate patterns. "This is a honor feather," he said. "The highest recognition my people can bestow. It is given to those who have served the Velorath with exceptional courage and sacrifice." He held it out to her. "I give it to you, Doctor. Okonkwo, not because you humiliated us, but because you gave us back our truth, even when we did not want it, even when we hated you for it. Lena took the feather. It was lighter than she expected, almost weightless. Your species knows what it means to carry historical guilt, Tyrion continued. You understand the weight of ancestral sin. Perhaps that is why you could hear the predecessors when we could not. Perhaps that is why they left their gift for you to find. He stood, preparing to leave. We are all children of the same. Stars, Doctor, Okonkwo, what one generation loses, another may find. I did not believe that before, but I am beginning to learn. He walked away, leaving Lena alone in the garden. She looked down at the feather in her hands. Then she looked up at the stars, burning bright and eternal above her. Somewhere out there, the predecessors were listening. And finally, after millions of years of silence, their children had learned to speak.